Hello and welcome to the Yggdrasil podcast. I am your host, Redditosker. Today we have HMK with us, a Zelda YouTuber. He focuses on Zelda a lot. Welcome, HMK. Thank you for coming.
Oh, of course, of course. This sounds like a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Could you tell my audience a little bit about your channel and what you do and what you cover predominantly?
All right, awesome. So, just like Rad said, I cover a lot of Zelda. I'm a huge Zelda fan. I grew up with the series. I love it to death, and I'm extremely excited for what is coming up for the future of the series. I deal with a lot of theories. I deal with a lot of breakdowns, predictions, and I overall get like really hyped and excited for all things Zelda. And I also cover Kingdom Hearts, Nintendo, Square Enix, but Zelda will always be my first and number one love. And basically, to round out everything what I do on my channel is to get you excited and to make you think about the possibilities at hand when it comes to these franchises.
How long have you been in the Zelda fandom? What was your first one that you played?
Okay, so the first Zelda game technically that I played was The Legend of Zelda, but I was extremely young at the time. So, I mean, like, the only time I actually remember playing an NES game, which my first ever game was Duck Hunt. And when it comes to Legend of Zelda, the first one, like, I played it, but it didn't really stick with me up until I played A Link to the Past. So I often consider A Link to the Past like the first true Zelda that you know, played and cognitively remember. But then after I touched Ocarina of Time, it was over. So
Right,
I was there from the beginning.
right. And which one's your favorite? Now that you've been with the series all the way from the beginning, pretty much.
With the release of Breath of the Wild for the longest, I was just so wowed, impressed, and like everything when it came to covering that game going into the release, I was extremely what's the word I'm looking for? Like I was overwhelmed by the game so much so that I'm like, okay, how good can this game be? How good? Like my expectations were shattered when I played Breath of the Wild, and I
Hmm.
often consider that game to be my favorite going forward at that point. But as time goes on, like I start gravitating back to my old love, and right now it's battling within my heart where is the like my favorite Zelda game at the time. So I mean, I kind of consider them both at this point, where it's Breath of the Wild and Ocarina of Time.
Right.
But hopefully, Tears of the Kingdom is going to change all of that.
Yeah, here's hoping. Here's hoping. I I've been one of the earliest games that I played was Ocarina of Time, and that one was my favorite for a long time. It might still be my favorite now. It's hard to tell with Zelda.
Right.
But I transitioned, like, I even though I've been in this content creator space for about 2 years, I never made any Zelda content because I was busy making content for like Elden Ring and Monster Hunter.
Right.
But then I realized, hey, wait, I love Zelda games. I think Zelda games are immaculate. Like they're perfect heroes' journeys. I think they're perfectly told. I have so many good things to say about Zelda games, and now I'm a YouTuber, and I've got a sizable following now. It's like I wonder if I can transition into Zelda making it. Like every little Zelda fan dreams about being a Zelda YouTuber and making Zelda content. And that's pretty much what I've tried to do. It's worked out so far, I think.
Yeah, I've seen the channel and I'm like, wow, this is great. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I really thought the algorithm was going to give me a beatdown for a while. It did the same thing when I tried to transition to Monster Hunter, to Elden Ring, and try and focus on those things specifically. But this time it was like, you know what? I think I'm starting to get how your channel functions. I'm going to let you get a pass here. Have your normal view numbers. No penalties for you.
It's always a coin flip when it comes to the algorithm and stuff. Just like, man, I really want to do content that I'm not really known for, because like one thing when it comes to content creators and YouTubers that the audience often misperceives is that, hey, this content creator only focuses on Zelda, Kingdom Hearts, and then when they find out that I play games like No More Heroes or other video games I'm not known for, it's like, wow, you play those games? It's like, yeah, I actually play a lot of games. Then why don't you do the content? It's like, the algorithm, not too kind sometimes.
Because I've kind of just been doing whatever I want the whole time I've had this channel, and just jumping around from flagship series to flagship series, and talking about little irrelevant things here and there interspersed. one of the running jokes that I have is unsubscribe from my channel, and it's a long-standing running joke. But I'm kind of serious because it's like, man, I don't know what I'm going to produce, next week or next year. If you're here for like Elden Ring content and you subbed for a specific kind of content, I can't guarantee that that's the content that I'm going to be doing going forward. So you might as well unsubscribe. If I make a really good Elden Ring video, it'll probably pop up in your feed.
That's very true. Like a lot of people's like, bro, I only subscribe for this type of content. I'm like, well, I mean, sometimes I want to experiment and whatnot. And hopefully if the algorithm is really kind to me, you're going to see this anyways. So.
So I was looking through your channel and I was like, all right, where should we start? Because there's a lot to talk about. Like a lot's been going on in Zelda space. But I thought that this was probably the best one. I saw your video where you were talking about, I guess it was from a stream. It's a clip from a stream you had, where you're talking about the whole, is Breath of the Wild a good Zelda game? It's a bad Zelda game. And that was actually the first video that I covered on my channel. I made a video covering that topic. And I loved your video. Like, I thought it was hilarious. I loved your reactions to it. So I thought we could start with that. What do you think? Is Breath of the Wild a bad Zelda game?
Oh, by no means, no means. I've been seeing that hot take a lot ever since Breath of the Wild first came out in 2017, right? And a lot of people like to use a lot of, I would say, conjecture when trying to drive that point home that, Breath of the Wild is a good game, but a bad Zelda game. And,
yeah.
I really dislike that argument when it's used in an incorrect context, because I feel like a more correct context, because I was literally talking about this on the stream not too long ago, where when you would try to apply the argument of good game but bad blank game to a game like Zelda or Breath of the Wild, it doesn't really work, because Breath of the Wild is still in essence a Zelda game where it's an adventure game. The game revolves around puzzles and combat. It has all the makings of what makes Zelda a Zelda in it, but it's just applied in a different way. I feel a better argument for saying that it's a good game but a bad blank game is something like, which I feel like transitions into Tears of the Kingdom really, really well, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later, is Banjo and Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Yeah, it's a good game, but it's a bad Banjo-Kazooie game, because there's nothing about the game that makes it Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Kazooie is always about being a platformer in these, very specific worlds and levels. And, I remember following that game up into release, and then, like, one thing that really stuck with me when it comes to the developers talking about Nuts and Bolts going into release was that, hey, this game is going to contain about 2% platforming. And I'm like, bro, what? And, I played Nuts and Bolts, and it's a fun kart building, like, vehicle building adventure game, but it's not a Banjo-Kazooie game. So, good game, but bad Banjo. Right. You can't really say that for Breath of the Wild, because it still has puzzles, it still has combat, it still has exploration on way bigger scale than any other Zelda game, and so seamless to that, to any point of any open world game that I've played, because I love open world games, and I feel that the genre is a bit oversaturated at this point, but Breath of the Wild was literally a breath of fresh air when applying that to the game. So much so that Nintendo feels the need to call it an open air adventure instead of open world adventure, which I get, because the verticality in that game is unlike anything I've ever seen in terms of open world game, and I've played Assassin's Creed. So when it comes to the whole idea of Breath of the Wild being a bad Zelda but a good game, I just like it. That doesn't make any sense. I understand that people didn't like how the Divine Beasts function as dungeons. I personally liked it, because I went in with the mentality that Nintendo was promoting this game for the longest, in which this is going to challenge conventions of Zelda. So much so, and that the Divine Beast was definitely one. Now, I'm not saying that Breath of the Wild is perfect, but I'm saying it's a really, really, really good game. It's, one of the best Zeldas ever. The game features a very limited enemy variety, a very limited boss variety. The music is, something, it leaves something to be desired at certain points. And I never thought the story was bad, but the presentation of the story definitely needs some work. And I feel that these aspects are going to be refined and fixed when it comes to going into Tears of the Kingdom. But to say Breath of the Wild is a bad Zelda is just so, lack of a better word, I would say a bit ignorant, because Zelda, even though there has been formulas and formats, I would say coming from the 3D formula, going into Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, and then the top-down Zeldas like Zelda 1, Link to the Past, Link Between Worlds, Minish Cap, Oracle games, yada yada, and even the touch games with Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. This is a concept, this is a genre, this is a style that constantly evolves and gets more refined, right? And Breath of the Wild only came into being thanks to the big domino effect that was started with Twilight Princess going into Skyward Sword, going into this game. Because, and I feel a lot of people didn't realize this, and a very interesting comment was left on that video specifically, and I'm like, okay, I get how people are like tackling this retroactively, but that still doesn't make it a good argument, in which, a lot of people's first Zelda was Breath of the Wild, or a lot of people's first Zelda was Twilight Princess, which was like the start of the domino effect, in which they went back and played Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Majora's Mask, and then they played Skyward Sword afterwards and Breath of the Wild afterwards, and using Twilight Princess as a focal point, they use that as a slight against Breath of the Wild and how that game was tackled. But the reality is that growing up into Zelda and seeing everyone playing Zelda from Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask to Wind Waker, the Zelda formula became that. It was a formula that a lot of people expected. Dungeon 1, Dungeon 2, maybe Dungeon 3, and then get the Master Sword second half of the game, right? That was a formula that was tackled in Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess. And at Twilight Princess, if you guys had to be there. 2006, it reached a boiling point where a lot of people were like, okay, Zelda's getting way too formulaic. We need to see this changed up. A lot of people didn't want Twilight Princess plus, right? And this is going off people that played Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Majora's Mask before that, right? So then Nintendo decided to change things up with Skyward Sword, and a lot of people didn't really like the linearity or the motion controls. I loved both. I thought Skyward Sword was, once again, another breath of fresh air, something to like change things up for Zelda, and it had an amazing story and art style.
Right.
But then Nintendo took that to heart when it's like, okay, this game's a bit linear. We want people to truly have that big open adventure. I guess they want to dial back to what we attempted with Twilight Princess. And Twilight Princess overall was pretty barren, even though it was the biggest in Zelda at the time. And then we get Breath of the Wild, challenging the conventions of Zelda even more than Skyward Sword attempted. And that was due to everyone saying that Zelda was getting a little too formulaic, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how Breath of the Wild came into being. And it still is a Zelda game, through and through. Now, of course, I keep saying this time and time again, that as much as I love Breath of the Wild, going into Tears of the Kingdom and seeing what they are showing off, it really makes it feel, even when playing the game, that Breath of the Wild was a big experiment, right? It was a very successful experiment, but it was an experiment nonetheless, right? They were testing things out, and I feel that all the good that has originated from Breath of the Wild will be refined to the point in Tears of the Kingdom that's going to make Breath of the Wild look like an afterthought. And
man, I sure hope so. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's gonna. I'm 100% confident in Nintendo, and then Zelda keeps getting refined, changing, and as long as you keep the core aspects of the game, in which you are Link, you must use your ingenuity, your talents, your items in order to solve these puzzles, and clear out the enemies using different aspects of combat and how you decide to tackle each situation going forward in the game. That's what makes Zelda a Zelda, and that's my take on it. I know I got a little winded on that, but that's the whole aspect of it. So I want everyone to understand all points of application when it comes to viewing how Breath of the Wild came to being, and that it is truly a Zelda game and one of the best.
So you brought up a lot of interesting stuff in there. Well, okay, let me give you my take. First of all, I actually hate the phrase "it's a good game, but a bad Zelda." I actually just don't like that phrase, and the reason I don't like that phrase is because it's not even because necessarily they're not saying anything useful or that they're wrong exactly. That's not why I don't like it. It's because it's said in the exact same way. It's the exact same sentence. It's said in the exact same way by everyone, which for sure means a lot of the people that are saying it didn't think of this on their own. They didn't come up with this sentence on their own. They say it in the same tone. They say it in the same intonation. They emphasize on the same words whenever they're explaining their argument. And it's I hear it over and over, and I'm just like, some popular YouTuber popularized this phrase.
Nice opinion. Did a YouTuber give it to you?
Yeah. And it's become this whole thing. They're just parroting this idea that they got somewhere else, and we'll talk about whether it fits or not in a minute. But that's what really annoys me about it. I'm not arguing with a person at that point. I'm arguing with like the same person over and over over the course of years, because I mean, people have been saying that since Breath of the Wild was released, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, okay, so I get where they're coming from. I get what they're saying. I made that video talking about it where, look, Zelda has been this thing for a long time, and a lot of these iconic elements that Zelda has had consistently over the years that people loved were removed in Breath of the Wild, and they really didn't have an adequate replacement. You talked about the Divine Beasts. I actually did hate the Divine Beasts. I hated the Divine Beasts, hated the shrines. It's not even, okay, you know what? Maybe that's not fair. It's not even that I hated them. I hated them in relation to the fact that there was no proper dungeons. If they were there and then there were also dungeons, like I wouldn't give. I thought, oh, these are neat, these are great, these are wonderful. I don't care. It's just that the fact that they are supposed to represent what was their attempt at replacing dungeons. They're a poor replacement for dungeons, in my opinion. Instead of some 120 shrines, how about you have 60 shrines and you devote the resources and the manpower to make the other 60 and turn them into like 2 or 3 dungeons and put them across the map, something like that. But the Divine Beasts weren't bad necessarily. I went back and I played them recently, and I looked at the kind of puzzles that were in there. I was like, these are some kind of nice puzzles. These are some kind of nice interaction. It's actually very clever because the beast actually is kind of in the overworld. So they were restricted in what they could do with it. Like, they're limited to the fact that these Divine Beast mechs are out here and they have to move, and you have to be able to mess with their moving parts. And I thought to myself, imagine what they could do if they actually had an actual dungeon, a proper dungeon that's in a kind of separate space, kind of like the shrines, and they have unlimited room to work with. They don't have to restrict themselves to this tiny Divine Beast format. Like, they could do something amazing. They could do something incredible in Tears of the Kingdom with elements like that.
I definitely agree. Because I trust me, I really, really did want traditional dungeons back after playing the Divine Beast. Like, I enjoyed them, but I do agree in the sense that they are not a good replacement for traditional dungeons. And I would definitely want to see how they would tackle something like that in a grander sense, because looking back at it, the Divine Beasts were kind of small. They definitely were tiny in comparison to more traditional dungeons and whatnot. And I feel that Nintendo definitely was like dipping their toes back into the idea of traditional dungeons within the DLC of Breath of the Wild, the Champion's Ballad, that final dungeon. I'm like, okay, see, this is what I'm talking about, but bigger. Make this bigger, right? And considering that the Divine Beasts are probably going to be nowhere to be, they're so far in all the trailers for Tears of the Kingdom, they're nowhere to be seen. So I want to assume, I want to assume that they're either gone or have been destroyed by Ganondorf. I feel that dungeons are on their way to coming back, because from each trailer there's like a tiny little bit of breadcrumbs, possibly alluding or insinuating that dungeons are back ever since the first trailer. So hopefully Nintendo hears loud and clear. I'm like, hey, listen, the Divine Beast, it was a good experiment. I'm pretty much done with that now. Give me the traditional dungeons. But I would have to disagree with a certain point when it comes to the Sheikah shrines. Personally, I adored the Sheikah shrines so much. Like, I love that there was 120, so much so that I'm like, yo, Tears of the Kingdom, give me 150, please. Like, I honestly love the idea of exploring this massive overworld and then finding these shrines and getting piece by piece by piece of dungeons and puzzles. Some of these were extremely clever, and some of these were extremely
some of them were really
enjoyable.
Good,
yeah. And then some of them didn't even have a puzzle within them. They just had a reward because finding these shrines was part of the puzzle. So I'm like, okay, I do like that. It was always so interesting every time my Sheikah Slate will start beeping. I'm like, oh, there's a shrine nearby? Okay, all right, let me see if I can find it. What secret is across the bend? It was that it always constantly gave me that. And that was one of the biggest focal points, one of my favorite parts of Breath of the Wild, that made exploring this world worth it. Because, I mean, of course, if you have this big explorable world and there's nothing to do with it or there's nothing to interact with it, that what's the point in having a world this massive? But with the integration of Sheikah shrines and so many of them, I'm like, okay, I need to find another one just to, find some treasure or increase my stamina or heart meter, or like, I want to see what happens when I find all of them. So that part of the game just had me hooked so much. And I'm like, this is, not even the Divine Beasts, because the Divine Beasts, like, they were fun, but I will say, like, if it was Divine Beasts that replaced traditional dungeons, I'm not down.
Right.
But
Right.
120 shrines instead of traditional dungeons, I'm like, I like this. And I'm fine with this. But at the same time, for Tears of the Kingdom, you'll up the ante, Nintendo. I've been saying, listen, on top of possibly more shrines, and maybe if they want Divine Beast to return, because I have this idea that all the, calamity that's going on with Hyrule right now, like you can see in Death Mountain, there's malice pouring out from the volcano. You see this giant whirlwind up near the Hebrew or Tabantha region. I want to assume that this is Ganondorf making the Divine Beast going haywire way more so than in Breath of the Wild. So if shrines would return and Divine Beasts were to return, put traditional dungeons on top of that, up in the sky or in the underground, and I'll be like, Tears of the Kingdom game of the year, let's go. All right?
No, yeah, for real. If they did, like, I've been expecting, man, there's so much that I've been expecting. We'll touch on this particular aspect later, but I just want to mention it.
Right.
Breath of the Wild ended development, and Tears of the Kingdom started development, like, pretty much soon after, same year. So it's been in development for 6 years. And that's like a bigger development period than the development period, I think, between Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild. So it's a big chunk of time.
Mm-hmm.
And they already have Breath of the Wild built. It's already there. Like it's so they're just building up on an extremely stable foundation. So it's like, what kind of stuff could they bring to the table? So I'm expecting huge, like, things that we're not even, things I can't even come up with because I'm not as talented a game designer as they are. I'm not the one in there making, like, what I'm expecting is stuff so good I didn't know I wanted it being introduced in Tears of the Kingdom. That's my current mindset based on the development time alone.
Right? And, like, going off that point, when I've seen what they had in store for the latest trailer, I've been theorizing for years and, like, thinking, like, what could they add? What could be this? What could make this game like a sequel? And then we've seen the underground, the sky. I'm like, all right, that's cool. That's cool.
The underground mushroom things that they showed with the bokoblins mining, that looked actually pretty excellent. Like, that looked amazing.
Yeah. I'm like, because I've played Elden Ring as well, and it's funny. I recently beat it because I'm like, I didn't want it to end. I had like 150 hours on my first file, and I had to do New Game Plus to get all the achievements because I messed up at one point. And I'm like, the underground area, like I keep forgetting the name of it, but like the stars in the underground, the Forbidden City,
Shifra River, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, this is an underground because, like, funny enough, like, to little segue, I was playing Elden Ring this whole year with my friends, and they're like, "Oh, you're playing Elden Ring? Yo, stream it on Discord." And then we were all saying, like, "Yo, the map just keeps getting bigger and bigger." And then we get to the underground. I'm like, "Bro, how big is this game?"
Right.
And, so, like, I hope Nintendo follows in that footsteps when it comes to the underground, because the underground does look massive.
The same. Like, I keep hoping that we have an Elden Ring moment where it's like, okay, we think it's this kind of game. Maybe that's why they're still not revealing as much as I would like them to reveal. It's like we'll have this moment where, like, you head underground. It's like, oh my god, it's so massive. But then it keeps scaling up and down. Like, you go up into these scale. It's like, because you've seen some clips where you're really high up, like way higher up than you would expect to be able to get to. And it looks like you can still go higher from that point. So I was like, man, how high up are they going to go? It's like people complain about, some people I've seen complain about, oh, we're still stuck in Hyrule. What if the map doesn't work the way we're thinking? What if we keep going up and keep going down way further than what we initially thought? That would be incredible if that happened.
Yeah, a lot of people really doubt the ability of, like, it's the y-axis, right? The y-axis is the vertical axis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people doubt the power of the y-axis. And, in this recent trailer, I'm pretty sure we've gone the highest we've ever seen in terms of the Sky Islands.
Yeah.
So much so where like every cloud in the shot is below Link.
Yeah.
And one thing I want Nintendo to like, talk to us about, because you know how Breath of the Wild deals with a climate and temperature system. Tell me how Link is not going to freeze to death at that altitude. Like I'm pretty sure like you're seeing the curvature of the Earth at that point. So the sky literally, no pun intended, is truly the limit in terms, in terms of how big this game could be and how deep we can go into the underground. So I'm honestly excited to see the scale on that. But like aside from that point, in terms of how big Tears of the Kingdom is in relation to the original map of Breath of the Wild, another thing that made me realize this is a sequel is all of the building mechanics that we got revealed in this trailer.
Okay, hang on. You're
all right.
Because we're getting ahead of ourselves. I wanted to talk about that in a little more depth in a minute.
Gotcha.
We got a little sidetracked. I wanted to finish up this thought. I just wanted to have it on record. I do think that Breath of the Wild is a Zelda game. It's totally a Zelda game. I understand. They bucked the conventions. A lot of the things that people felt should have been there that made Zelda for them weren't there. Dungeons, a focus on puzzles, unauthored story, compelling characters. I did actually think the story of Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, was compelling, but it also was compelling for past Link. Present Link didn't have very much to do.
Right.
Present Link is just cleaning up the pieces. Past Link, was the one with the really compelling narrative. I actually liked that Zelda couldn't activate her Triforce power. She couldn't activate her Goddess power. She didn't know what she was doing wrong. She felt, she's feeling the pressure of everything. She's like initially jealous of Link. He sees him perfectly fulfilling his role, and she's just fucking up everywhere. Her dad's like, stop messing with the robots and get back to praying. And she's like, praying's not working, Dad. At least let me play with the robots.
This isn't what I want to do.
Yeah. And then it's hilarious, and they go to the last shrine, and it's not working. She doesn't understand why, and they're walking back, and then boom, Calamity Ganon appears. It's too late. You ran out of time. You fucked up. And then it's even funnier because Mipha was about to tell her to stop being such a selfish person, and maybe it would work.
Right.
If she started using her powers for other people, like if she did it with a desire to save people. She was about to give her the key to the kingdom, basically, and then immediately we're out of time. Couldn't even finish the sentence. And it's not until after like everybody's dead, like all the divine beasts are dead, everybody has died, and they're running away from Guardians, and Link's about to die, that she realizes how to activate her powers. It was good. Like it really was. It was a good series of cutscenes. I just wasn't as immersed as I could have been because it wasn't happening to the character at present. It wasn't happening to this Link. It was happening to past Link. It was just setting up the story, which I think it hurt it narratively. But I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, well, having the story in pieces definitely hurt it in my opinion, because a lot of people are used to, I would say, the linearity of Zelda story. I wouldn't say the linearity of Zelda game, even though the games are kind of linear to a point. And seeing all of these cutscenes, these memories, if you will, in jumbled order, depending on how you find them and tackle them, and then people playing Manhunt in order to find these memories in the first place. A lot of people didn't like that, and I definitely do understand. I do agree.
I actually don't. I actually thought that.
Oh, really?
No, yeah. I thought it was a good thing to have them jumbled up and in separate places, and encouraging you to explore to find them, and then having them in cutscene piecemeal, and you have to put them together. I thought that was fine. My complaint isn't that, but go ahead, finish your thought.
Right. Because I personally didn't have like a complaint towards that mechanic, but I do understand, like, I'm not, that's not the point I argue against, where it's like, oh, when they say the story is bad, I'm like, no, the story is good. But when they say the presentation is bad, I'm like, okay, I get that. That's a very valid argument, which I do agree with. But the story in itself, when it comes to the present day Link, I feel like, it is a bit bare bones in comparison to the past what do you call it, memories. And hopefully Tears of the Kingdom will, fix that, because I mean, like, there's nothing to remember at this point. Link already has all of his memories in tow. Hopefully by the time we go into Breath of the Wild, I mean Tears of the Kingdom, because obviously he's starting the game with the Master Sword, so that kind of like plays into the idea that we're going off the true ending. And with all of that being said, how Link interacted with the characters of the present day, like Sidon, Riju, Yonobo, Teba, like, it was always, I would say, a bit crippled because of the fact that he didn't have the memories, or like the game kind of assumes that you don't have enough memories to, like, remember what's going on in this area, because the 4 champion memories are specifically tied to going to these places. You can find every other memory and be like, hey, I remember a lot, but then there's 4 memories missing, and it's because, like, oh, you actually have to go there and then get the memories themselves. And the game really plays off of that, which I feel like it adds to the mysticism. It really does. But then it leaves a lot to be desired when you get these memories of, like, oh, this is the type of person Link was. This is the type of interactions he had with his friends. This is the type of interactions he had with Zelda, right? But then you get all of that kind of after the fact, a little too much, a little too late type deal. And I don't dislike it, but I see where people, like, they aren't 100% down with it. But I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, oh, to each their own, or an acquired taste. Personally, I digged it, but I wouldn't want to see them tackle that again in Tears of the Kingdom, unless they put in a memory mechanic specifically for Ganondorf, where you find out his memories.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah, like, so in addition to the real-time story, now that Link and Zelda are, in real time with their memories, finding out what's going on with the kingdom, the Tears of the Kingdom, and doing that, also solving the mystery on why Ganondorf is so pissed, could be like a grand story. So take that element that, basically plagued Breath of the Wild for a lot of people, rework it for Ganondorf in order to get another side of the story rather than the whole story itself.
Okay, well, first of all, for me, like, I really, the problem really was just that the stakes were odd. Like, the stakes were lower than they should have been, because all of the important events really just did happen in the past, and you're going about collecting, piecing them together. But what you need to do is made, immediately clear. There really isn't a story past the Great Plateau, except go kill, you got to go kill Ganon. You can immediately go and kill Ganon. And that's one of the strengths of Breath of the Wild. Before Breath of the Wild, open world games weren't really that open. Like, nothing had ever tackled open. Maybe even it's rare now that it's actually it had an emphasis on freedom that few games like dare to do. You actually can go anywhere. A lot of people, that's the appeal of open world games. But most open world games don't actually let you go anywhere. Like, they gate your exploration behind something. So either be it story narrative, items you haven't gotten yet, or you're not supposed to be in that city yet. Depending on what open world you're playing. But Breath of the Wild gated it behind nothing, not even story narrative, because you can tackle any part of the story that you want. You can immediately go kill Ganon if you want to. You can go to any of the 4 villages and start their individual stories there. So there is no limits in Breath of the Wild, which was unique for the time. But still, one of the reasons why I think it's still very authored in certain ways is because a lot of us had a lot of the same experiences, and that was intentional. Everybody praises the Great Plateau. Everybody thinks the Great Plateau is like the greatest tutorial that's ever been made. Everybody fondly talks about the Great Plateau, even though it was the most restrictive area. It was the area that had the most limitations. So limitations can be good. You didn't have your Paracel yet. You didn't have your powers all to start with. You had very, very little in the way of weapons and armor and what you could collect. But people, like, fondly remember the Great Plateau. And I think it's because it really is because it limitations do something to a story. You come up upon the Temple of Time. It's a natural thing. Everybody goes up to the Temple of Time. And then the Temple of Time music starts playing, which is actually like a reimagining of the original Temple of Time music. If you speed it up, it's actually just the Temple of Time song in a piano key, but much slower.
Right. And, obviously that's the biggest draw because when you play a Zelda game, or if you've played a Zelda game before in terms of like 3D Zelda, you automatically gravitate towards the temple all the time.
Mm.
And it's like, ooh, wow, what? And I feel that a lot of people, in terms
Or Lon Lon
of
Ranch. A lot of people tell me that they enjoyed, happening upon Lon Lon Ranch and seeing it destroyed and the music starts playing. A lot of people tell me
right.
that they like that kind of thing.
Yeah, like, seeing a lot of familiar aspects from previous Zelda games when it comes to across the entire timeline itself, which I hope to see in terms of, Skyloft within the Sky Islands. We'll have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that a really big point of, I would say, praise when it comes to the Great Plateau in terms of, like, it being, like, the best tutorial area is that, it does definitely, it's restrictive because it's, like, meant to teach you everything you're supposed to, know for this game. So as soon as you get off the Great Plateau, it's like, oh, training wheels off. But hey, it was quite, the ride on that training wheels, like, is basically on a motorcycle with training wheels.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people pointing out this idea, myself included, where if you think about it, the Great Plateau is kind of the size of, like, the entire map of Ocarina of Time. And then, like, when you finally break free of that size and see how truly big Breath of the Wild is in relation to, the first 3D Zelda, just like, oh, it really clicks and like, oh, this is it. This is gonna be the game. So I feel that's like a very key point of praise for that, and I'm like, I get it, I understand.
You mentioned that you didn't. You had reservations about the music in Breath of the Wild. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, of course. When it comes to, like, the reservations, I would say, is only because of, I would say, going forward from Breath of the Wild. For Breath of the Wild, it works. It definitely does, right? But then, for Tears of the Kingdom, let's not do that again, because a lot of things when it comes to Breath of the Wild is not only the air of experimentation, it's also the air of mystery, right? You are going into this world of Hyrule that experiences great calamity 100 years ago, and you don't remember anything, right? So when riding through Hyrule, in terms of the Hyrule field during day and night, it's very somber, it's very atmospheric, right? And it was pretty good, but moving forward into Tears of the Kingdom, I'm like, okay, I get it. There's no more air of mystery. I need to save this place. It's on fire. So, like, I don't know if, like, a little, piano solo is gonna really convey the absolute need to, like, save this place. And also when it comes to Breath of the Wild's more dynamic music, because even though it was not a lot, it had some really cool dynamic pieces.
It had a few. It had a few, yeah.
Yeah, the Molduga theme, the Divine Beast themes. When you have like 4 to 5 terminals already activated, the Champions themes, like when you hear them, there's like, oh, this is great, this is bumping. But then as soon as it shows up, it goes just as quickly, and that's something I'm like, like, I love Breath of the Wild, but like, why couldn't that theme just stick around for a little bit more, So that's my main reservation. It wasn't like, the music in itself, it's how the music was, tackled in terms of more dynamic music. And I'm saying 100%, I understand why they did what they did when it comes to the music, and I didn't hate the themes. It's just that, going into Tears of the Kingdom, there is no more mystery when it comes to the world in itself. We need something a little bit more, bumping. So that's like the core to my reservation for that.
So it's kind of funny because in a lot of points in this podcast, I've been like, right now people are like talking in my comment sections a lot of the videos that I've made for Zelda. It's like, oh, he's a Breath of the Wild hater. He's a Ocarina of Time shill, something like that. And yet here, I actually like the music in Breath of the Wild a lot, and I will defend the music in Breath of the Wild to a degree. I actually think it like you said, it fit perfectly for what they were doing. Like, you're in this vast open world, the soft, subtle music in a lot of places, very, very low, right? It reminds me a lot of Elden Ring in a way, and I think it should be more like Elden Ring, actually, because see, Elden Ring had background music in the overworld, and that was a new thing for them. That was a new thing for them. In previous Souls games, there was no background music, except the only time there was music was in certain key locations and in boss rooms for boss battles. But the thing that with Elden Ring is that Elden Ring kept legacy dungeons. You know, they had the dungeons have always been the big appeal for the design of the legacy dungeons is very much how they were in Souls games, maybe even better, especially Stormvale. What's that other place? What's the capital? The capital, whatever. Leyendell. They're some of the best legacy dungeons they've ever made. And if Tears of the Kingdoms brings dungeons back, I want them to bring that dynamic bump in music that you like to the dungeons.
Mm-hmm.
The kinds of music that I used to hear in the dungeons in the past needs to be in the dungeons. I'm perfectly cool if they keep the subtle, emotional, quiet tracks for exploring the overworld or even these sky islands. But if they have dungeons, large, sprawling, traditional dungeons that I'm gonna be in there for a while, I want traditional music. Like I want real, real Zelda music in the dungeons.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I'm feeling about that currently.
Like I definitely understand. Considering that Elden Ring, the music in Elden Ring I felt was really, really well done, and a lot of people make some compare and contrast to how the music was done in Elden Ring in terms of being an open world Souls game to like Zelda being an open world Zelda game, and I enjoyed the music, I would say, in Elden Ring far more than I did in terms of the atmospheric sense,
Right.
when compared to Breath of the Wild. Because when you go to different areas, like, man, these area names are like,
Liurnia and Caelid.
yeah. When you Caelid, the air, like it's the swamp area surrounding Raya Lucaria. Like that was actually one of my favorite themes, like exploring that like watery area, getting up to the castle. And it changes. It's like even though it's still atmospheric, it's like it has that really good balance between atmospheric and dynamic. And Breath of the Wild, it just went a little too much into the atmospheric side of the slider. So I hope, like, if they're gonna retain some atmospheric music for Tears of the Kingdom, I feel like a good balance, just like how they did in Elden Ring, would go a very long way.
What do you think? I'm sure you have. This is almost as common as that other phrase we were talking. But have you ever heard someone will say that they didn't like Breath of the Wild diverging so far from the Zelda formula, and somebody else will say, like in a forum or a comment or even in real life, they'll say, these young kids, what you don't know and don't understand because you're so young and stupid is that Breath of the Wild is actually a return to form for Zelda. It's like Zelda 1. It's a reimagining of the original formula. So this is real Zelda. This is what classic Zelda is. Have you heard that? And what are your
Yes.
thoughts on that?
I've heard that a lot, actually. And like, okay, see, when people say it like that, I get where you're coming from. But look, listen, you're going a little too far. Don't be calling kids stupid like that. It's like, oh, you stupid newbies or anything like that. It's like, no, because one thing that people really understand is that like Zelda 1 started everything, and I love Zelda 1, but Zelda 1 was just a very like all over the place type of game, so much so that the current supervisor of Zelda, IG Aonuma, is like, man, I'll never play that game again. It's just there's a lot within Zelda 1 that you had to figure out for yourself. If you don't look at a guide or anything like that, there's a lot in Zelda 1 you have to figure out for yourself with absolutely no cues whatsoever, right? And then people can argue that's like, oh, is that good or bad game design, right? Because there's literally like caves in Zelda 1. You have no idea that they're there unless you decide to bomb every square pixel, right? And you don't have infinite bombs like you do in Breath of the Wild. And in Breath of the Wild, when you could bomb, when there's something that's bombable, it's very telling. Like there's a big like mound of like discolored rocks or like a big crack in the wall. Zelda 1 didn't really have that, and that's just skimming the surface on what goes down in terms of like Zelda 1. Of course, the limitations of the NES and then what Nintendo was conveying and trying to like portray with this game. But when people say like, oh, it's Return to Zelda and that's like a reimagine or remake of Zelda 1, and like, okay, it took a lot of aspects from Zelda 1, but it also took a lot of aspects from Ocarina of Time. It took a lot of aspects from this and that, but at the same time, it changed it for its own. So when people say Breath of the Wild is just at most a glorified remake of Zelda 1, I'm like, no, it's not. It's its own thing. Right?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel very much that Breath of the Wild is its own thing, and even if it's true, that okay, well, basically, what my problem with is the same problem I had with those other people. I kind of hate both of these groups. It's the phrasing. It's like you know why I even if it was true, you know why I don't say stuff like that? Because every single person that's ever talked about Zelda has heard that. You know, anything that's talked about this topic has heard it because people have told them. People like it's like, well, actually, little nerd emoji. You know, you know, the original Zelda is
Right.
Breath of the Wild is very much like the original Zelda. Here's the thing: it's like they bring this up like it's a gotcha, like it's a. But I find it completely an irrelevant point. It literally has no value in this conversation. The conversation that people usually introduce this argument into is people that grew up with Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time kind of Zeldas, or Twilight Princess, or Wind Waker, or Skyward Sword, or whatever Zelda they started on, other than the first two, I suppose. They're like, look, Breath of the Wild eschews all of these conventions. You know, they took a lot of these things that we love and put them in Breath of the Wild, and there's no adequate replacement. We find that Breath of the Wild is not like classic Zelda. And then they're like, well, actually, classic Zelda is Zelda 1. And I'm like, bro, Ocarina of Time is 24 years old. I'm willing to bet a good bit of money that most Zelda fans started in Breath of the Wild. You know, like most people that are Zelda fans today started Breath of the Wild sold 28 million copies. Twilight Princess was the best-selling Zelda game before that, and it sold 10 million, and it struggled to sell 10 million. You know, most people that started this series are people that started with Breath of the Wild in today's world. And you know, Ocarina being 24 years old, that's classic Zelda. There are people that are fans of the series that are not 24 years old. You know, they weren't alive when Ocarina came out. Ocarina and its conventions that it established, and Link to the Past and its conventions that it established, have been here forever. If you're like a classic Zelda fan, like original Zelda fan, and you've been waiting, what? Like what? When did it come out? 1986. If you've been waiting, what? 30,
was
40,
no, yeah.
30 years? You've been waiting 30 years?
More than 35 years at this point.
You've been waiting 35 years for a return to form, and Breath of the Wild is your return to form. I'm happy for you. But you're not even a Zelda, you're not a classic Zelda player. You're a fossil. You're a fossil. I'm happy for you and all 8 of you other people that have stayed alive up to this point.
Yep, looking like Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, you're looking Ganondorf looking ass people.
But yeah, like, you know, it's really there's like it boils down to that point where that funny image that I keep seeing where it's like, oh no, the best Zelda game is the one I played when I was a kid. No, the best Zelda game is the one I played when I was a kid. And then, you know, you had like these differentiating, you know, generations when it comes to how they're applying what is a Zelda game, what isn't, and then, you know, the biggest context that they're going off of is like either Zelda 1, A Link to the Past, or Ocarina of Time. But now we've reached to the point it's like, no, now they're basing it off of Twilight Princess. I'm like, man, Zelda's been around forever.
It's been around for a long time, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, actually, okay, let's talk about one more Zelda thing before we get to Tears of the Kingdom and start tackling that heavily. What are your thoughts on Skyward Sword? Because Skyward Sword was really the controversial one before Breath of the Wild came out. Like, that was the one people talked about. Tons of people hated it. Tons of people were complaining about it. I think you mentioned the complaints people had in your about the formula just a little bit ago. What are your thoughts on Skyward Sword?
Skyward Sword is my favorite Zelda game after Ocarina of Time.
Nice.
Like, I adored Skyward Sword. And when, like, a lot of complaints I've seen with people is like, you know, the ones where it's like the linearity, I'm like, okay, I get it. But then a lot of people was like, I don't like Skyward Sword, but then go around and say, I love Metroid. And I'm like, how? How? What? Because Link doesn't do projectiles? Like, oh, I don't understand. Anyways, I loved how the game progressed. I loved the tightness of the story. And the combat was amazing for me. A lot of people complain about the motion controls, and I never had an issue with them.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I played the original on the Wii, and then when I see people complaining about I've seen a couple of cases that people complained about the motion controls for the Wii version and even the Switch version of Skyward Sword, and I'm like, okay, and I see them actually attempt, and I'm using the word attempt very, very, very drastically, to play the game. And when they're swinging the sword, they're swinging it so wildly, and I'm like, no, what are you doing? Like, you're supposed to do the motion,
do the motion. Yeah, swing it like a real sword. Like actually, like if you're going diagonally, do diagonally. If you're going up and down, do it up and down.
But like they're swinging it so wildly where they like, like the controller cannot register you swinging the sword for more. Like if you're doing a slashing motion that requires you to do the motion lasts more than a second, then like you're doing it wrong, because you're supposed to like, you like flick it to the right, flick it up, flick it diagonally. That's your sword motion. But people's like, no, I'm in the game, virtual reality, baby. I'm like, no, that's not how you do it. So when it comes to the motion controls, when it like Skyward Sword had some amazing music, some of my favorite
incredible
music in
music,
Zelda.
incredible music.
Some of the best boss fights in Zelda, like Koloktos, that is
I think the
top
best
5.
boss fights. I think the best boss fights in the series. I don't think you can even consider the other one. Like it was the first time bosses were hard for me. Like I got messed up a couple of times in the bosses.
Yeah, and a lot of people are like, nah, the bosses in Twilight Princess are better, and I'm like, Twilight Princess had some amazing designs for bosses.
And
here's the thing about Twilight Princess for me. It was painstakingly easy. All the bosses were easy. I did not sweat once in Twilight Princess.
Apart from the 2D Zelda games, because the 2D Zelda games can be kind of hard. But apart from the 2D Zelda games, there are no hard Zelda games, really. Except for Skyward Sword. That's the only one. And that was because you were actually required to... It actually had skill involved in using the motion controls. I really loved it. I loved it.
Oh, I adored Skyward Sword, but then also a lot of people complain about how like, oh, the items were limited, and that even though like the game like focuses a lot on the whole motion aspect of the level of control, it was a lot of people's like it's too linear into the story, the progression of the world, and also the use and progression of items.
People also complained about Fi. They didn't like Fi. She was very annoying.
Oh man, what?
In the original one, they're constantly complaining about how your batteries are getting low, your notifications after every item. A lot of people, they changed that in the Switch version though. Like all that's gone.
Yeah, but when talking about Zelda partners, people are like, oh, Fi is annoying. Like the best Zelda partner is Midna.
Midna, obviously, yeah.
Yeah. We're like, oh, Fi is annoying, Navi is annoying. I'm like, guys, the worst Zelda partner is Tattle. Like, it has been, always will be, right? People are like, Elzo, whatever. And I'm like, no.
Tattle was the fairy from Majora's Mask?
Yes.
I thought she was always going for that mean tsundere vibe.
And that's annoying.
Yeah, that's annoying. That's just abuse.
Right? Like, bro, you're supposed to help me. And it's funny because like going from Ocarina of Time to Majora's Mask, going from Navi to Tattle, like Navi is always like respectful when you scan an enemy. She's like, oh, this does this. But Tattle's like, oh, what? You don't know about this enemy? Man, watch out for it. And I'm like, yo, you're on my side. Like
that's hilarious.
What are you doing?
That's hilarious.
So I love Skyward Sword.
So like I love a lot about Skyward Sword. I did have my problems with it, but like the things that are good about it are really good. The characters I thought were amazing. Groose is one of my favorite characters. His storyline is incredible.
Oh yeah.
Like I really specifically like Groose. Gear him too, but Groose, he's this bully up in Skyloft, and then he's been bullying Link his whole life. And then Zelda disappears. He has a crush on Zelda. He follows Link down to the ground. And then Demise the Forsaken, Forbidden, what is it called? The monster thing that comes out from the center of the ground.
The Imprisoned.
The Imprisoned. Yes, The Imprisoned comes out. Groose can't do anything. He has to realize that Link is the hero. He's nobody. His little hierarchy, his idea of himself is destroyed. And he's like depressed. And over the course of the game, like you go off and do other stuff. And when Groose is depressed, he just gets the fuck over it. Like he's like, you know what? I'm going to make a rail catapult around the Forsaken to keep it imprisoned. And the very scene at the end where he's like cheering Link on, he helps him out, and then he go meet Zelda, and he's like, tell Zelda, you know what? Never mind. Walks away. Incredible scene. Incredible. I love Groose so much.
And one of the song that was playing during that scene is actually called "Dejected Groose," and it's one of the best
Yes.
like music pieces in all of Zelda, and it only plays once in the game, and I'm like,
incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
that is so good. And it's funny because Goose's design, when a lot of people don't notice this, but then like you have to point it out, it's like Goose's design is straight up like based on Ganondorf. Like he's
Red
big,
hair.
he's tall, red hair, yellow eyes, all
Yellow
that
eyes,
stuff.
yeah.
Right? So a lot of people call him like, the proto Ganondorf of this game. And then like he is one of the main characters. Like the ending shot for Skyward Sword shows Link, Zelda, and Groose all together.
That's
it's
wonderful.
like, once upon a time before the curse, these three, entities that are like pervading throughout the entirety of Zelda were once, classmates. So I'm like, God, Skyward Sword is so good.
Skyward
Man,
Sword
I can't
is really
believe.
good. I also loved Girahim. I loved everything about his design,
please.
his boss fights. The first time you fight him, he's like he's confident, he's composed, but he's still crazy. And like you're completely inexperienced. You're barely fumbling with those gyro controls, those Wii controls. You're barely understanding how the combat works. And this guy, it like catches your sword between his fingers and then takes it away from you and starts swinging at you before throwing it at you. I was like, oh my god, his attacks do like 1 heart of damage each. It's like, man, I only have 3 hearts.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
what is going on here? You have to like counter his projectiles in a specific motion so it was incredible. It's like, wow, this is some high tier combat.
And I loved his characterization, and I loved his design. Like everything was so good about Girahim.
Yeah.
Right. And then that final
his dialogue too.
Oh yeah. And the final reveal when you find out he's a sword spirit as well, and I'm like, okay, see, this is peak. Like this is what I'm talking about. And that boss fight was really fun too.
Yeah.
I just hope because his destiny, his fate was not really clear at the end of Skyward Sword. And if you look at all of the encompassing media when it comes to Zelda, like Hyrule Historia, Encyclopedia, all that, none of it states what happened to him. Like,
right?
Did he die? Did he run? Like we don't know. That's why I'm like, I'm hoping Tears of the Kingdom, because like
Breath of the Wild did have Fi. Yeah, Breath of the Wild had Fi.
Fi returns in Breath of the Wild, and I want to assume that she does in Tears of the Kingdom because that one trailer where Aji Aonuma delays the game. And where Link takes out the busted Master Sword and it's glowing like it would glow if Fi is talking to you. I want to assume that Fi still talks to you, but in a very like weak, damaged state, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, if they bring back Fi, like bring back Girahim, like come on, like
this
man was biding his time for like over eons.
If we're talking about like the prongs with Skyward Sword, I actually didn't think the prongs were any of the things that we've mentioned. It's not Fi, it's not the gyro controllers, it's not even necessarily the linearity for me. It's the puzzles. In Breath of the Wild, I was constantly like thinking, man, I wish there was more puzzles. I wish there was like a dungeon where I can interact with puzzles. Like it's this puzzle list, I'm climbing up stuff all over the place. The extent of the puzzles are Korok steeds. I was just hungry for puzzles. But Skyward Sword was like the opposite. It all completely had the opposite problem. There was no overworld in Skyward Sword. It didn't exist. Right. It did not exist. There was a series of puzzle rooms. That's all there was. Ocarina had an overworld. You could just exist and relax. Just chill. Just you can go to Lon Lon Ranch and just exist. You could go to the market town and just go do some mini games in there. There were spaces in between dungeons where you just explored and were like you could just exist, and that was like a big appeal of Breath of the Wild. Skyward Sword did not have any of that. It had only Skyloft, and then the overworld and the bottom was a series of puzzles before you got to the dungeon, which is just more puzzles. It's like constantly, every second of every moment, every day was just puzzles in Skyward Sword. It was incredibly annoying. That was actually what my problem was with it, not any of the other stuff.
Personally, I like that a lot. Like I love that.
You didn't get tired?
Game. No, like the whole game was just one big dungeon when you think about it.
Yes.
It was just I love that.
Too much.
I love no. Like it was like it just constantly kept you on your toes. I'm like, this is it. Like, oh no, that's like one of my favorite things about Skyward Sword. It's like it's constantly on your toes. You have to constantly figure out what you're doing. There's no time to breathe because I made peace. Like, because going into like I've been following Zelda content and I've been doing Zelda content and I've been like following Zelda, I would say like what's the word I'm looking for? Zelda media. I've been following it for a very long time when I was very little, right? So when it comes to them like talking about Skyward Sword, talking about Skyward Sword way before release, I made peace with the fact that this game wasn't gonna have exploration. This game, like, I mean, it does, but not in the sense of like Zelda games before it, right? It wasn't gonna have an overworld like these games, like this game.
Was that made clear in the marketing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was very made clear. So like I made peace with that going into Skyward Sword. So like sure, like I'm like okay, there's no real sense of exploration like there was in Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, or in Wind Waker, or in Twilight Princess. But like this is kind of what I got, and I understood that because they wanted to focus on the motion controls. They wanted to focus on the one-to-one sword fighting and whatnot. So I mean, to compensate for that a little bit, they had to sacrifice the overworld, which I understood. But what we got instead was like like amazing for me. Like I was like, okay, more puzzles, more this, more that. How do I get here? How do I get there? How do I solve this? How do I solve that? I'm gonna have to like wiggle that noodle a little bit in my head. And I just that I fell in love with that thing because like once again I'm a huge Metroid fan as well, and then Metroid kind of like boils down to that when 2D or 3D, where it's like okay, you're in this room, there's no time to breathe really, you can't just be, you're constantly trying to figure out how to get from this room to that room, and then you figure out this room can't be open.
It was very much like Metroid actually. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And then, like, there's a lot of people that still don't see that. And I'm like, how? Like, this is, like, they literally ripped a page out of Metroid and ran with it in this game. So, I'm a big fan of that. So, that wasn't really something that, like, troubled me. I don't think there's anything that really troubled me in terms of Skyward Sword. That's probably why I like it so much. That's probably why I consider it, like, one of my top Zeldas. I don't think there's a moment in Skyward Sword I'm like, okay, this ain't it. Or this ain't it. Or anything like that. Maybe... Like the only thing I could think of there is like, man, is shifting the camera perspective when I'm trying to catch some tumbleweeds, and then it crashes into like a wall, and I'm like, bro, why do I need these?
I barely remember that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, we've talked about like old Zeldas for enough. We haven't even talked about the trailer yet. We're at an hour deep. Let's try and move into that.
Right.
Okay, new trailer came out at the end of the Nintendo Direct. Fucking fantastic direct, by the way.
Oh,
yeah. One of the greatest directs. I haven't been covering like video games for that long, about 2 years, but I think it's the best one I've seen in these 2 years that I've been doing this. It's so many high quality things. That so many different. It obviously depends if nothing that you like was shown, but like there was a lot of things that a lot of people liked. I felt.
Yeah, because like it was jam packed, especially like I would say not only a Zelda fan, but just like a fan of video games in general. It was jam-packed to the brim. Like, we started with Pikmin. We got Metroid Prime Remastered. We got Game Boy and
the
Game
same
Boy
day.
Advance. Right?
Yeah.
Game Boy Advance on the Switch.
Yeah.
The Xenoblade 3 DLC made me screech. And then ending everything with Tears. Professor Layton coming back. Like, come on.
Yeah, I thought he was dead. I thought that series was over. I thought there was no way they were bringing him back.
And they did, and that's what we call a teaser. Literally, he's in a new town, turns around, and I'm like, that's a teaser, right? So having all of that and ending with Tears of the Kingdom, like that was honestly, in my opinion, that was an amazing direct, right?
All right, so what do we think about the Tears of the Kingdom trailer itself? What are your impressions?
Oh, like I loved it. Finally we heard Ganondorf talk, which, by the way, a lot of people have been doing a lot of like sleuthing on like, oh, who is that? Is that Matt Mercer? Is that Patrick Syetz? It's funny because the other than Japanese, a bunch of the other dubbed voice actors have kind of like revealed themselves already. And I'm like, it's only English and Japanese where they're like, no one's speaking up. I'm like, yo, who are you? Like, let me know. And like hearing Ganondorf talk was amazing. Like I was kind of scared that he wasn't, but then now we get that kind of pretty much hard confirmation that he is. And then like seeing the scene that was in the first Breath of the Wild 2 trailer when it was called Breath of the Wild 2, the scene where Ganondorf wakes up, it got updated. We saw what happened to Link's arm finally, because a lot of people's like, did it get burned off completely? Did it get mangled to the point? And now we know like, oh, it got charred beyond like use. I mean, it does get repaired, and like he did use it, but like, yo, that's some damage. We got the confirmation of underground. We got to see like us go even higher and higher and higher.
What did you think of the voice actor?
Say it again?
What did you think of the voice acting for Ganondorf?
Oh, I liked it. A lot of people like I've seen a lot of people like say they loved it, or they're like, oh, I wasn't feeling it. I wanted them to feel more like evil or raspy or gargly, like or old, like oh god, this is me, I'm Ganondorf, I am gonna destroy it. I'm like, no, because like Ganondorf was always this refined, cultured, regal entity. Like this man's the great
He
king
plays the
of
opera.
evil.
I mean, he plays
Yeah,
the organ
exactly.
in the original Ocarina of Time.
Exactly. You know, like the way he said he's like, oh, eliminate this kingdom in her eyes. I was literally visualizing him with like a glass of wine swirling it around as he's
Dracula.
saying it. Yeah. And I'm like, that like to me, that's like perfect portrayal of this guy. Right? Like that's always what he wanted, like that's always what I kind of got. And then when he got really angry, where he's like, leave no survivor. Okay, all right, that's the rage. Like he can do both. Like he can, rally his troops and
I-
then be angry.
I actually didn't like it very much.
Really?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I was not feeling it at all, and I felt this way a lot about most of Breath of the Wild's voice acting. I thought Zelda was fine, was okay-ish, but the Gorons, I didn't like any of the Goron voice actor. Rook, his champion, none of them. Mipha was okay. I don't even think I even liked Sidon's voice actor. I kind of. Do they have the option in Breath of the Wild to turn it into Japanese? Is that a thing?
Yeah, so they added that after the fact.
Okay,
And
I might just
personally, I switched that on too.
I might just put it on Japanese. Because I listened to the Japanese one. I think I listened to the Spanish one. I listened to several others. I just do not like the English voice actor for this one. I think I'm gonna change it, switch it to Japanese, because there's not that much dialogue that's with words. It's usually written text. Almost all the dialogue in Breath of the Wild was written text with noises, just like other Zeldas. The cutscenes were all with voices, but even the champions had text that wasn't dialogue. It was just text. So I'm not going to miss much. I'm totally putting on the voice actors. Don't like it. Weird.
I definitely get where people are coming from when it comes to Breath of the Wild's portrayal of voice acting, right? Because I mean, obviously, this is the first Zelda game that has a more extensive amount of voice acting than any other Zelda. Like probably the closest that came to it was Tetra Trackers, which never came out to the States. But here's the thing: I don't think it's an issue. And I've said this time and time again. I don't think it's an issue with the voice actors or their own voices. I feel it's an issue with the voice direction. Who's in charge in the booth, because when playing Breath of the Wild and people think that the voice acting was a bit jarring, I'm like, okay, I understand it. Like, it's nothing against the voice actors, because they're all amazing voice actors, and I've listened to all of their roles before, and like in other types of media, such as Patricia Somerset, the voice actor for Raleigh, he plays the Luke in Genshin Impact. Sean Chiplock. There you go, Sean Chiplock, among other voice actors. Right now, when you take those voice actors, because they also reprise all of the roles in Age of Calamity, and in Age of Calamity, they had a different voice director.
Oh, okay.
And I felt their voice acting in that game was miles better than how they did it in Breath of the Wild, right? And it was like, oh, there's a different voice actor doing this one, there's a different voice director, heading this project specifically. And then there's a lot of things in Age of Calamity that a lot of people, they sandbag that game a lot, because oh, is it canon? Is it not? Time travel? Blah 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 blah. I love that game. I love Warriors games as well. So Age of Calamity did a lot of things that improved upon how they tackled certain presentation elements in Breath of the Wild, and that includes voice direction, and that also includes color filters. Because I don't know if you're in the same boat as this, and I'm actually gonna send you a couple of images here in the Discord to help drive my point home. And that is, I love Breath of the Wild, and I love the way the graphics were presented or whatever. However, there is a lot of points within the game itself where the filter that they use in Breath of the Wild was just a little too much.
Okay.
Right? In which it made the game look a bit hazy or anything, but people were like, oh, but that's that's how the game's supposed to look. I'm like, no, it's not. Because in Age of Calamity, they get rid of all that. In Age of Calamity, they make the colors pop so much more than they did on in Breath of the Wild, which I get the argument that some people say is like, oh, remember this was built for the Wii U at first. I'm like, okay, I get that. And then if you actually
That
notice
is
in the
true,
latest,
yeah.
if you actually notice in the latest trailer for Breath of the Wild, the one that we're talking about right now, there's actually 2 filters they use in the game, which I'm bringing up in my analysis, which I think should come out today. There's 2 filters in the game, and I dubbed one of them the sky filter. So when Link is up in the air in the Sky Islands, there's a very like powerful contrast blue filter there. But as soon as he descends, there's actually a point you can see in that trailer where they switch the filters, where he reaches closer to the land, and I'm like, oh, okay, so they're doing this. All right, dope, right? But in Age of Calamity, they get rid of that filter. Like to be a bit mean, a lot of people have dubbed that filter the piss filter, and I'm like, okay, this is like it's 100%. So I'm gonna bring up some images as we're getting to our next point to like help convey that, because here we go, where I've dealt with color correction. So this is the original image, like. For those watching the video, I don't know if you guys are gonna be able to see this, because I'm just sending it to
I'll put it up.
Oscar.
Yeah, I'll put it up.
So that's the original image, right? This is what I did to remove the piss filter.
Yeah, that does look a lot better.
Yeah, so here's another example, and like Age of Calamity fixes that. So
okay.
And in Tears of the Kingdom, I hope that's fixed as well. And I just like. I feel like there's a lot of like I said before. I keep saying Breath of the Wild was just a big.
You think there'll be a lot of improvements in Tears of the Kingdom? So,
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, all kinds
Going off of what I've seen in Age of Calamity.
Okay, are we sure that Ganondorf is Ganondorf? We sure that voice belongs to Ganondorf? Is it like
yes?
So because it's like that's the most likely supposition right now. That's a safe bet that is actually Ganondorf. But we have only seen him in Raisin form so far. We've only seen Raisin Ganondorf right now, and that Ganondorf does not look like he can do anything other than scream in pain. So if that is Ganondorf's voice actor, and that's how he's going to sound in the game, does that imply that he's going to not look like a Raisin when at some point throughout the story?
Hopefully, he might not, because there's actually a point in the trailer, which I'm bringing up in my analysis, that when it like there's this like big explosion scene where if you stop at a certain frame, you can actually see the the silhouette of Ganondorf within that, right? But then as the scene goes on, it kind of looks like it explodes, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that Blight Ganons explode in Breath of the Wild. So a lot of people are like, well, not a lot of people, like I'm thinking is like, yo, is he gonna like blow up or something, right? Where like he probably, if we're going by what we see here, he probably understands that his body at that point is not going to be able to recover like at all, right? So maybe he's like, oh, so let me leave this body behind and make a new one that's going to be more pristine, how I looked before I came to this state, right? So maybe that will happen in that sense, but at any point, I really do hope we do see like pristine Ganondorf. I wouldn't want him to.
You want to see him like his what he's going to look like in this game, like actual revived Ganondorf.
Right. Yes. I want to see him like nice and neat, like and cool. Like I would say like a lot of people like you call him a raisin, and I'm like mummified Ganondorf.
Yeah.
I want to see him nice looking. So I just want to see.
I do like the design. I think the design is incredible. Like it looks.
Oh no, he's super cool.
So scary, so cool
Yeah.
with his mummified thing. The arm gripping his chest. He's bent over backwards in what might be pain, like just stuck there. It's an incredible scene. So it's almost like a waste to not have him as a momentary confrontation. Like I want to fight that Ganondorf before he gets into his full power.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely,
I would love to fight that original Ganondorf where he's like not even in his right mind, just crazed in pain. Like I would love to fight that. Even if you like canonically lose, even if it's one of those fights where it's like you win but you lose, in the cutscene, it'd be fine with me because I'd love to get a shot at that crazy Ganondorf first before we see like the huge 7-foot tall muscular Ganondorf that we're sure to see at some point.
Oh yeah, definitely. Just like I just don't want that to be the only way we like Ganondorf
we interact with him
in the game.
Because if he is just stuck like that, we'd have another Calamity Ganon basically.
Yeah,
I agree. So here's a question I have. All right, so Link loses his arm to the Malice. It looks like the Malice like encompasses his arm, grabs his arm, and it messes his arm up. Okay, what broke the Master Sword? Okay, here's the thing.
Man,
here's the thing. The Master Sword is not supposed to break because it has the same wounds on it that looks like your arm has it. So presumably the Malice like corroded it. That seems what a lot of people are just assuming right now. Just completely breaks it, corrodes it away. The Master Sword is not supposed to corrode away just with Malice. It's the Sword of Evil's Bane. You know, it's the Blade of Evil's Bane. It should just be obliterating Malice. The moment Malice touches the Master Sword, it should just disintegrate. So it's like, this is some serious business if the Master Sword, which by all appearances was working fine in Breath of the Wild, like there shouldn't have been any reason for it not to function the way it's supposed to function. So you're telling me just Malice touched it and corroded it away? Nah, there's some element they're not explaining. There's something going on here for it to be so strong that it just corrodes the Master Sword away.
Exactly. You know, I feel there's a big part of that in mystery, which I'm like, they need to explain this in the game. I am not like, I'm done with this hanky panky, like, oh, like figure it out yourself, or it's like, oh, it's left to the imagination. Yeah. No, explain this.
You gotta tell me.
So the biggest theory that's... Oh, go on.
Well, I was just going to say that also Zelda is like, please help him. And she's like, Link, I don't know if you're strong enough to... I don't think... This is ridiculous. Like, I don't think you can take him. And I was like, wait, right? You don't think I can take... You don't think...
It's like, where did that confidence go, man?
This is new. Like, this is new for a Zelda game. Like, Zelda's like, bro, I don't know. And she's asking some other thing for help to help you out. Because she's worried. She's actually scared. She doesn't think you can take him. All the other Zelda games, it's like she's sure that you can take him. Like, she's always been sure that you could take Ganondorf.
Yep.
She's just waiting. She might be afraid or scared or nervous, but she's always, even in Breath of the Wild, you were dead and dying. She puts you in a coffin. She puts you in the healing thing, and she's like, I'm gonna go seal him away for 100 years, and I'm sure you're gonna come get him. It's like she's got so much faith and patience. She's willing to wait for 100 years, holding him off while you go and collect mighty bananas and shit.
Yeah.
But now it's different. Okay, that's narratively interesting. I'm very hopeful that they're gonna. That, you know, Onuma has that quote where it's like, we're showing you something a little bit darker than normal. I'm super hopeful that. People keep comparing this to Majora's Mask. You know, it's like, this is like the Majora's Mask asset flip. They flipped the assets from Ocarina of Time, and yet they came up with this incredible new things, even though they were using much of the same elements. And I'm like, okay, that's great, because Majora's Mask is one of the best. And it's like one of the best ones. It did an incredible job with what it was given. It had one of the greatest, most interesting stories, in my opinion. Really narratively ambitious was Majora's Mask. And I'm hoping that this is like that. From what I've seen, my inclination is they're going all out. The story's going to be incredible, something like we've never seen before, unexpected.
Oh, and I'm ready, and I'm like, I'm keen on them not, what's the word, exposing too much of the story, but I just need like more gameplay elements.
Yeah.
But dialing back to the Master Sword thing, I'm like, how is that even possible? Whatnot. There's this big theory floating around, but of course I feel that it's going to be a lot more to it, where the reason why this is able to happen to a sword that up until Breath of the Wild we thought there's no way to damage it, right? Is that going into the Breath of the Wild and from previous Zelda games is constantly like parroted in Herald that since Link was the one to build the Master Sword way back when in Skyward Sword, that obviously this is tied to Link specifically, that only Link may wield it, thus the name the Master Sword, that it only beckons to its one master, right? And then Link is reborn time and time again. So the big theory is that the Master Sword is also like heralded as not only the sword that of the Blade of Evil's Bane, it's also Link's ally, tool, and counterpart. Like, since Link built this thing, it was also a representation of him in his own power. That's why it's so imperative for Link to prove himself before getting it in certain games, such as Breath of the Wild, A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds. He has to prove that, like, oh, he is ready to wield this 100%. And then that's also a big theory on why, you know, they sealed him away in Ocarina of Time. It's like, oh, you were too young. It's like, is it really though? Because I mean, we've seen like kid Links, you know, use this thing. It's like, is he too young? It's like, no, like this, he had to be ready. His his own force, his own body, his own power had to be ready in order to be wielding this thing to its full capacity, right? And I'm not saying Breath of the Wild Link isn't. However, from what we've seen in Breath of the Wild and in Tears of the Kingdom, the Master Sword only got damaged to the points we've seen only at points where Link himself was significantly damaged. In Breath of the Wild, he was busted up.
Oh, I see.
Like he was to the point of dying when he was protecting Zelda from all the guardians, right?
Yeah.
You can see like cuts, bruises, everything. His like he was gone, right? And then the Master Sword was chipped, like stained with the malice, like
Yeah.
to the point of like, okay, this thing looks like it could snap into at any second, right? And then, but like he was damaged to the point where like he's gonna need to be stuck in the Shrine of Resurrection. Now dial to Tears of the Kingdom. His arm, his chest, like you can actually see points in the trailer where his chest, his skin on parts of his chest is caved in. He has parts of himself literally missing from how his arm got messed up, right?
Yeah.
So because of him experiencing that level of damage, the sword also reflected that level of weakness, thus being able to be split into by the malice
So
itself.
if Link is damaged, the Master Sword is the theory that
exactly.
You know, that's interesting. So maybe what there's is the people that expound this theory are they saying that when Link went into recovery in Breath of the Wild, when he recovered, so did the Master Sword. That's why it was That's why it was healed by the time he gets to it, because he was healed by the time he gets to it.
Exactly.
That's super interesting, and it kind of fits with the new arm that he has, because in the logo it shows the Master Sword is repaired with this green energy, like it's made complete. It's broken and it's made complete by this green glowing energy that a lot of people say reminds them of Twilight. Magic.
Just like how Link is damaged and repaired by that
arm. Yeah, by that arm.
Yeah.
So that makes sense if big if true.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's cool.
So like that's like the idea behind that, and this trailer is so good.
It's full of stuff. It's full of interesting stuff. I think you made a comment on the. You think that the online functionality that they mentioned in the thing is going to have for the vehicles, you'll be able to upload vehicles onto like some kind of cloud, and then people are like, "Oh, this is a cool configuration. I'm going to download the schematics and see if I have the parts for it."
Exactly. That I believe that's what they're going to do 100%. Like after seeing that, because like the whole idea of these machines, when you take a look at it, it's like it screams the fact that you have to build it yourself, because there's a lot of weird green glue that's keeping all the parts together.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like, okay, so you have to build this thing yourself. It's going to have online functionality. These are parts that you have to find in the overworld. So, hey, I built this unicycle. Do you guys want to build a unicycle? There's what I had to do in order to put it together.
Yeah.
Right. And there's probably going to be like 2 different types of building options, where like one, you build it yourself, or 2, if you have the blueprint and you have the parts, maybe you could like, pay someone or expand your rupees or materials, like, hey, build it for me, right? And it puts it together all at once. Instead of you like, okay, glue here, wheel here. Like I feel like Breath of the Wild's own systems were very robust. And if they're going to be tackling this type of like vehicle creation or even weapon creation, it's going to be robust as well. Because I feel that's also going to spill over to the fact that at one point in that trailer, Link is wielding this giant cannon hammer thing, right? I feel that's something you have to put together yourself.
Right.
Because, one shot looks like it was a piece of that mechanical enemy that we saw from the second trailer.
Yes.
So like, you break it down, pick it up, put it together yourself.
Yeah, there'll probably be enemies that have those pieces, and we'll be able to kill them and take the pieces and use them on other stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds very interesting. What is your thoughts on... Okay, what do you think the likelihood is of playable Zelda? A lot of people are hammering about playable Zelda. What do you think the chances are?
It's funny like that we're bringing this up. One, I feel the chances at this point, 4 trailers in, it's a bit low. And honestly, it's no skin off my back if Zelda isn't playable or not. And I feel like she's going to be, once again, your partner, a guiding voice, because I feel like she's going to be lost. She's going to be captured, more than likely, by Ganondorf. And
that does seem to be the way they're going. But there's one thing that... Okay, so Nintendo just put out, like today, before we had our podcast, they put out a tweet with the picture, the new Zelda
Yeah,
art.
the official art.
Yeah, and in the tweet they're like, "It's Princess Zelda. What does she have in her hands?" With little like being coy about it, and it's a Sheikah
Yeah.
slate. It's a Sheikah slate that she has in her hands, and
Is it though? Like,
well, it's something like a Sheikah slate.
oh yeah, it's going to function like it, but it's not exactly.
Yeah, no, it's
like it.
yeah, but it's similar to a Sheikah slate, and so like they're drawing attention to it. They put out this coy post, and so it's like, you know, I don't think I would care if there was a playable Zelda. Maybe I wouldn't even want a playable Zelda, but like in my wildest copium dreams, what I think would be cool is a co-op Zelda that you could you know, that refers to the online functionality. I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's likely at all. But I actually think that would be cool because like a giant game like Breath of the Wild would really benefit from having someone along with you to tackle, you know, bokoblin camps or whatever the hell you're doing.
Right.
Like there's like almost no downside to that experience. Something that you can pick up and play, and like a friend can come help you out, and maybe you'll get some online resources that would help out minorly in your own adventure. Whatever. As Zelda comes along, she can do most of the things that you can do, but she has that slate that instead of your arm. It'd be cool. I would like that. But if they don't add it, it's not going to be, you know, it's no deal breakers, no skin off my back if there's no Zelda. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, it's funny how you brought this up because sometimes I get really, really wild and vivid dreams. And I literally had a dream about this last night, specifically on the topic of playable Zelda. And before I get to that, like real quick, the thing that she's holding, it's funny because, you know, Breath of the Wild was originally developed and built for the Wii U. And I feel the Sheikah Slate was based off the Wii U gamepad for that. And then this thing is like, yo, it's based on the Switch. Like, it's like, oh, because like Tears of the Kingdom is made for the Switch. So like the new thing in her hand is like, oh, it's probably like an upgraded Sheikah Slate, or like they were able to convert the bulkier one that was based on the Wii U gamepad to this skinnier one, which is based on the Switch. But the thought process I had on the idea of a playable Zelda in my dream was very interesting. So it just had, like, in the dream, I had the idea where Zelda, for some weird reason, would be always at these points within the game, the new Sheikah watchtower thingies, or the watchtowers that replace the Sheikah towers. Like, those points in those are access points to certain areas of the underground, right? And that when you go there, you're able to, quote unquote, like summon, or Zelda's always there for some reason, to a specific area in the underground that is like closed off from the rest of the underground. And then you go down there, and then you're able to like either sync up with a friend locally or online, where one of you is Link, one of you is Zelda, and then you go in that very localized part, and then you fight enemies, you mine specific things in the underground, you find specific things, and you have to do it like within a timer. Like you have to go and do it within 5 or 10 minutes, and then you have to back out before like
that'd be kind of awesome. That'd be kind of incredible. Like it actually reminds me of Elden Ring a little bit in like taking a friend and tackling a legacy dungeon with you two. That sounds awesome.
Right. And I feel that idea was like inspired a lot by Genshin, whereas like there's specific points in Genshin where like, oh, to farm materials you have to go here, and then you can sync up with people online. And I'm like, yo, if Tears of the Kingdom were to tear a page out that book, or even the book of Elden Ring when it comes to the catacombs, like a catacomb, right? You know, to summon Zelda or to have Zelda playable along with you only in these catacombs, not in the overworld. I feel that would be a good compensation for those that want co-op, but not to take away from the whole grand sense of the game.
Yeah, no, I agree. Maybe that shouldn't be anywhere at any time. It could be a good solution to have it in specific locations. Great idea. Awesome stuff. What do you think? Okay, you know, actually, first of all, people keep making fun of how, in my comment sections, of how I say bokoblin. And I'm like, bro, I've never heard anyone say bokoblin. It's the kind of thing you read your whole life. So how do you?
No, it's bokoblin.
It is bokoblin.
Yeah, people say bokoblin, and I'm like, no, it's bokoblin.
Bokoblin. Like, okay. Well, yeah. Okay. Oh, just
or bokoblin, whatever.
Bokoblin.
Like, but it's that pronunciation. but like people say Bokoblin. It sounds like it's
Bokoblin.
Bokoblin. Yeah, it's
Okay.
Bokoblin.
Yeah.
Moblin, Bokoblin.
Yeah. Whatever.
So,
Okay. So you see them mining all over the place. What do you think they're doing? Why are they mining all over the place?
man, like I am 100% sure they're being dispatched by Ganondorf
Right.
to find something.
Find
Right?
something. Yeah.
Yeah, they're looking for something, and I like at the same time, it might be possible that they're also looking for Zonai parts, and this dials back to the idea of like, yo, Ganondorf may need a new body, so maybe they're looking for parts to like,
Oh, yeah.
help build a new body, or maybe like make a soup that his body comes out of the soup or something. But anything, they're looking for stuff that he needs.
You do see a Zonai part in one of the places where they're mining in the
Exactly.
trailer. Like you
Yeah.
find a little propeller or something on the rail tracks where you come up upon a little encampment and they're mining, and there's a Zonai part right next to them. So I think Zonai parts will be part of the rewards we do get now from that.
It's like 100% they're under instruction. And then specifically, the ones that we see actually mining, because I mean, of course, there's like a mining zone like above the clouds, but the one that we see Bokoblins and, Lizalfos actually mining in the underground, they're like super infected with malice, like the red malice. So they're probably being like, mind controlled or being whispers like, hey, mine,
Yeah.
find this now. Like, so they're probably like straight up being told what to do. And they're looking for something. There's something under the ground that Ganondorf wants, and we have to find out. And that's probably part of the mystery of like what it is.
What do you think is with the horns that they've all grown? Like there's a
I'm bringing this up in my analysis video.
Right.
That if you noticed, like check this out. You know how in Breath of the Wild, where Bokoblins, Lizalfos, Moblins, when you kill them, they always have this specific drop.
Yeah.
Right? Like Moblin horn
Yeah.
across the board.
Yeah.
But now in Tears of the Kingdom, red Moblin horns and blue Moblin horns
Are different.
have different designs.
Yep.
So they're probably going to have a way bigger variety of drops this time for some reason. And that's something that people are going to have to deal with. Like, hey, instead of, Moblin horns across the board, not Moblins, yeah, even that. Instead of Bokoblin horns off the bat, you're going to have to farm red Bokoblin horns and blue Bokoblin horns.
And not
so maybe
in a
there's going to
different
be a
trailer.
bigger...
In a different trailer,
What?
I could swear I see some Bokoblins, the red Bokoblins, that don't have the same horn as the other red Bokoblins in the recent trailer. Like if you go back to the other trailer where you have the stone talus, I think that the horns that they have are not the same as the horns that we just saw in the recent trailer. They have,
so if I remember correctly, so I'm pulling up the images right here.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, they have in the second trailer they have like a straight up like one unicorn horn looking thing.
Reminds kind of,
and then
looks kind of like the Moblin horn.
And I'm trying to figure out.
And in the most recent trailer, they have that sword looking horn, the spiky horn that we see.
Yeah, it's very sword looking. I mean, it could honestly be an updated design. It's like, oh,
that's true.
Like,
that's true. They may have changed the design of the horn. Well, the point is that these horns are very prominent. They're up there. They look like they're going to be upgrade materials. This is a good sign for people that are thinking that there'll be more things to upgrade. So who knows what this is upgrading? Maybe this hints at being able to repair or upgrade weapons. Weapons will probably still be breakable. All weapons will probably still be breakable, but maybe you can upgrade them and repair them more often than you could before. And these kind of things could allude to that, I think. And then there was the Hinox. The Hinox that you see in the cave has like a little wooden hat on top of his head, like it's protecting his horn. Like maybe he has a horn underneath the wooden hat, and you have to get through that before you can get at its horn. So maybe it's a weak spot as well for him.
Yeah. So, like, it's funny because like obviously they're taking old designs and like revamping them to be new and whatnot, and that hat looking thing looks very dangerous, but at the same time it's like, yo, what are you hiding under there? Or
maybe you can burn it to get underneath it, cut it to get underneath it. It'd be interesting to see it.
Exactly. And but the one thing I don't want to say I'm scared about, the one thing that I really hope they don't do in Tears of the Kingdom is that I don't want this to possibly suggest the fact that you have to expose the horn in order to get it. in which that
Ooh,
will
yeah.
like lead into the idea of percentage drops. I don't want that in Tears of the Kingdom. Please don't. Like,
You don't
if
want
I kill an
percentage?
enemy, no, like I don't want a percentage chance of it not dropping.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So I don't want, like, if I kill something in Tears of the Kingdom, I'm getting all the drops. Like horn, guts, everything, drop it. Right? That's I want that.
Don't they
Especially
have
if they're good.
don't they
What?
have percentage drops in Breath of the Wild where not every monster will give you guts? Like not every Lizardfoot will give you, I mean not every moblin will give you its guts or its horn.
They have percentage drops for guardians,
Okay.
right? And
So
they also
100
have percentage. They also have percentage drops for double drops for every other enemy, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
Yeah. So like, and that
I
was already a pain. Like trying to get ancient guardian cores from guardians, that was already a pain. And I'm like, ugh,
I would
man.
be okay with it having percentage drops by default, but guaranteed drops if you do something. Like let's say the Hinox that I was just describing. Maybe it has a percentage drop to drop his special horn that he has underneath there. But if you get through the wooden thing and you knock the horn out, then it's a guaranteed drop or something like that. I'd be all
Yeah.
for it. Like if the Guardian should have had something like that, then you wouldn't have had to suffer so much. There should have been there should have been a way
Suffer.
should have been a way to guarantee that they drop it by beating them in an interesting way.
Right. But like, maybe just like, okay, 100% from like maybe 50 or 60%, sure, or maybe 100% double drop. You know, it's just that percentage drops.
I come from a Monster Hunter background, so I'm okay with grinding and
Oh yeah,
monster. It's
so
okay.
I play a lot of Kingdom Hearts, and then like, you know, trying to get like that one drop
Yeah.
of like Serenity Stones and stuff. Like, ugh.
I'm perfectly fine with percentage drops and likelihoods, especially because it really depends. But if so far they've shown a couple of new basic enemies, they've shown some other like bigger enemies, some bosses. They have the dragon that's on the bridge. They have the
The Gleeok. Yep.
yeah, they have the cube golem thing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so all of that looks interesting. But for basic enemies, we've got the Redeads and we've got the new big boss Bokoblins things.
Right.
And that's pretty much all that we've seen. If there's not a significant amount of new enemies, like I don't need every single one of these things dropping the same materials that I'm going to be using. Like I'm sure to have plenty. Like I'm so sure for whatever it is that if it's just these things so far, which I actually hope they're not. Like I'm really expecting that they're just hiding more enemy variety. That was one of the biggest things people complained about
Oh, yeah,
in Breath of the
definitely.
Wild. I'm really hoping that the next gameplay. I don't want story related stuff. You know, I don't even honestly. I don't even care if they showed nothing at all. If they just said, "Hey, there's dungeons." There could be a blurb on some websites like, "Okay, there's for sure dungeons. Like you don't have to worry about it anymore."
Right. I would love like mechanics and stuff
Yes.
to be exposed.
Explain. Yeah.
Like, if you don't want story, I 100% like agree with that. But you know, I think what I think would be better, because I going off other RPGs I've played, if there's percentage drops, fine. Just no percentage spawn. How about that? like,
Yeah.
oh, this only has a 50% chance of spawning,
spawning here, yeah.
and then on top of that, only 50% chance of dropping it when
dropping
you
the
find
item,
it. And I'm
yeah.
like, no, one or the other, not both, please. So, yeah.
What do you think about the $70 price increase for the game?
Oh, of course. You know, here's the thing. I've seen many people arguing for both sides. And I've read what Nintendo said about it, where it's like, oh, it's case by case. It's not the trend moving forward, and yada, yada, yada. Now, like, I am a big Nintendo fan. I am a gigantic Zelda fan, right? And I'm a fan of Nintendo as creators, as developers. Not the biggest fan of Nintendo as a business, right? And a lot of people need to understand the separation of the two. And I've seen a lot of people like, oh, it's going to be worth it. Oh, this is a game we've been waiting for so long. Oh, this, oh, that. Listen, and I love the Switch. I, like, as big as Tears of the Kingdom may be portrayed to be or whatever, there is no way that I will ever agree with Nintendo justifying a price tag of $70 for a Nintendo Switch game. All right? But people like to argue, but PS5 and Xbox One, Xbox Series this S or X, right? And I'm like, that is next generation, right? Blu-ray discs aren't cheap. You know what the fidelity that they're going for, the next step in evolution in how they present games and how they have games do this and that and blah 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 blah. That is the compensation that I understand. You know, the SSD, the amount of RAM, all that stuff within the system in order to make a game like this run at like, you know, 1080p, 60 FPS, or even 4K. $10 increase, I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. For Switch, absolutely not. But I mean, at the same, and then people's like, oh, I'll gladly pay for this. I'll gladly pay for this. And it's at the point where I'm like, okay, listen, we can argue until the cows come home. Like, it's at a point where it's like, this is the first time they're doing something like this. It's Zelda. It's Tears of the Kingdom. Everyone's been waiting for this game, including me. Begrudgingly, I'm gonna have to pay. Like, obviously, like I'm gonna have to pay for that price tag. I don't like it, but I mean, like,
I mean, not even that. You're getting the collector's edition, so you're getting.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I actually feel a little bit better getting the collector's edition, paying for that price, because I get all that other stuff like that. It's like, oh, but I mean, the game's still $10 extra. I'm like, yeah, I don't like that. But people are going to be paying for it anyways because it's Zelda. It's Tears of the Kingdom.
It's very likely most people listening to this podcast, if they're gonna get it, they're paying the extra $10.
Exactly. Like, you're good. Like, people, like, you know, I've seen whispers about boycotting. I'm like, bro, like, that ain't gonna work.
You're not serious.
Gonna work.
First of all, you're not serious. That's not gonna work. Yeah. Second of all, but like, here's the thing. Here's my perspective on it. Games aren't priced what they're worth. If games were priced what they're worth to me, some games would be worth a lot more than $70, and some games would be priced a lot less than $60. They're priced not by their actual value. So I understand the some crap game comes out on PS5 and that comes out for $70 or something, and it's something I wouldn't pay $5 for, you know, and then something comes out for Nintendo and it's $70. And people are complaining about the extra price tag. It's like, okay, but if I was going to, if you were going to ask me how much would I pay to get to play this game, like what's actual value to me, it's probably a lot more than $70. If I was going to pay $60, I'm going to pay $70. And if you were going to ask me what's the price you would pay if you had no choice but to pay to play Elden Ring or Switch, it's probably a lot more than what I did pay. At the same time, you know, the Switch's lifespan is a lot longer. They're doing this because they think they can get away with it. That's why they're doing it, and they can get. And away they're gonna get away with it because I am gonna pay for it because it's worth a lot more than $70 to me. If it's not worth more than $70 to people, I encourage them not to buy it. I encourage them to wait till it's on sale.
Nintendo doing a sale.
Nintendo doesn't do sales, but like maybe it's on a sale. You know, it'll get returned to GameStop at some point, and you can buy a used copy from GameStop, or you can buy a used reseller key or something.
Right.
Pay what it's worth for you. If $70 is too rich for your blood, that's it. But like I think this whole dialogue is like silly because the people who are going to buy it are going to buy it. Like they're going to buy it, and I'm one of those people, so I have no room to talk.
But here's the thing, like it's not even for me. It's not even like, you know, pay games what you're worth, because I obviously believe in the, like, you know, more bang for your buck. I mean, like, look, Smash Bros. Ultimate, so much content, $60.
Yeah.
Right. Elden Ring is the game that doesn't end, and like, you know, wow. It's funny because like I look at myself like, wow, I paid this much for a game like Elden Ring. That's insane.
Yeah.
Right. But not every developer and not every developer, not every publisher has that mindset. So it's like incredibly erratic. But then when you look at things like not only as a fan, but also as a consumer, right? Like, if this practice obviously seems to work for the benefit of the company and not for the consumer, then one day it's going to be $10. The next day it's going to be $20. The day after that it's going to be $40, you know, in terms of price increase, right? And if people keep buying into this aspect, you know, how much, like, will developers realize they can get away with it and get away with when it comes to the consumers?
Okay,
right?
but here's the thing. It's not that I disagree with anything that you said. It's just that, okay, the reason that PlayStation 5 games and Xbox games are worth more is because their hardware is stronger. They can make more games, more graphically impressive,
refined.
Yeah. I don't pay for graphics. You know, like partially of what my money comes from is a payment for graphics. But if I'm being honest, I'm surprised games have stayed as low as they have for as long as they have in terms of price. Inflation just keeps going up. You know, the price of everything keeps increasing, but the price of games have remained mostly static, thanks in large part to the competition that they have to face for each other. So thank God that there's these companies that are always having to compete with each other, because they would have increased their prices a long time ago, if there weren't. And you know, Xbox and PlayStation have already increased their prices for their next gen games. Nintendo, there's no sign of a Switch 2 on the horizon. I don't think there's anything about Tears of the Kingdom that means it deserves less money than some random PlayStation 5 title, because the PlayStation 5 title, in theory, can have more pixels on the screen at once. Like, I honestly could not give a fuck about.
But it's also not about pixels, because like I agree with you. Is like, I'm like, when it comes to 4K, like looking at all of the pores of a character.
Yeah.
Like, sure, I understand like the amount of pixels. Like, I'm not paying for the amount of pixels, but at the same time, I am paying for game performance.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, if I'm paying $70 and a game like Tears of the Kingdom, which I hope it doesn't, because I mean it's built for the Switch, specifically for the Switch. Yeah. If this game is like dropping frames every other second, then I'm like,
oh yeah, that's
like, I love Zelda, but I need this to perform. Right?
I need my frames. I need every single one of those frames. I may not pay for pixels, but I am paying for frames.
I'm not paying for pixels, but I am paying for frames. Like, that's 100%. 100%.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
So, like, hopefully, like, as ambitious as this game is, like, I am 100% sure that, you know, sure, begrudgingly $70, Nintendo believes so, and if this game has the amount of content that I, think it has, because, like, Breath of the Wild was already a gigantic game, and if Tears of the Kingdom is going to take that to a level beyond that, and beyond that, and beyond that, right, after having the game in my hands, and then, like, okay, I pay $70 for this, all right, right? But at the same time, it's like, if Nintendo says it's not going to be a trend, and if I'm going to believe them, then I'm like, okay, because
there are certain games on there that I'd happy play $70 for it. So, Tears of the Kingdom, okay, I'll pay $70 for that. If Metroid Prime 4 ever comes out, you know what? I'll pay $70 for that for sure. Not everything on it I would be happy with. I'd be a lot less apologetic towards Nintendo if it was something other than this.
Right. So, like, even in that sense, I'm not like at the end of the day, when it comes to the $10 price increase, I'm not a fan. But when people say, I'll gladly play for it, like, it does rub me the wrong way, because like, I just don't want Nintendo to take this as
and run with
justification. I do not want them to take.
You don't want them to take the signal and it's like, all right, we can do this as many times as we fucking want. They'll keep paying for it because it's Zelda and it's Metroid and it's our the things that they love.
Yeah, and I'm like, and then people will be like, "Oh, what, you're broke?" It's like, no, I got the money for this. It's just that, like,
I hate when people do that shit. Like, I hate when they're like, "Oh, what are you broke? You need the extra $10 here? Let me give you." I was like, "Why are you doing that?
Like,
why are you paying?"
Exactly. Like, that one, this is for a Switch game. Remind you. Yeah. And two, like, at the same time, there's people that don't have the same amount of disposable income as everyone else.
Yeah.
So, like, everyone should be able to play games. Goodness.
All right.
But yeah.
There's one okay. Latest trailer, you get an image of the person with the green hand grabbing the woman, and the woman's like reaching out down to her and grabbing her hand.
Yep.
The person in the mural, the person with the green hand, is, I'm assuming, the same person. Do you think that it's the same person? And do you think that, I've seen a lot of people think that the person on the mural is Hylia and the person on the mural with her is Zelda. Do you agree with that? Do you think the person on the mural is Hylia, the one with the hand?
The one with the hand and the one of, like, the lady reaching out in that one scene. I believe there's is a big, long-winded thing, because there's so many parts. There's so many, like, conjoining parts to this, like, mystery, where I'm like, okay, it could, like, the person on the mural could be Hylia, and it could be, like, a different tribe's own interpretation of Hylia, such as the Zonai, right? At the same time, it could be a Zonai goddess. It could be someone that is connected. What the heck? It could be someone that is connected to Hylia, in which like, oh, maybe like a sister goddess, because after Skyward Sword, we got the introduction, like not even Skyward Sword, after Majora's Mask, we got the introduction of outlying goddesses that are outside of the three ancient golden goddesses, Danae or Pharaoh. Zelda insinuated that there's a goddess of time, which helps you out in Majora's Mask as you use the Ocarina of Time's power to repeat the 3 days. And then we got Hylia, who is a warden goddess that is dispatched and commanded by the golden goddesses in order to guard the Triforce from demise. So there is like the existence of like multiple goddesses outside, like the outer ring or the lower ring from the three golden goddesses of power, wisdom, and courage.
Okay, but in the trailer, who do you think is the person that's humanish and the person with the hand?
I think the person that's humanish is the person on the mural. That is not Hylia.
Oh,
I feel that this.
Oh, that's you're just turning everything on its head. Okay.
Yeah, I feel that this is a Zonai goddess that is probably connected to Hylia, possibly a sister or another outlying warden. That's why I brought up that whole idea of like multiple gods and whatnot, and that the green arm that's reaching out at this point is already attached to Link. There's Link's arm reaching out.
You think that's Link? Okay.
Yeah, and like forming a pact with this goddess.
Makes sense.
Right?
Makes sense.
And that the original aspect of that big green arm that before it joins with Link from the first trailer is that this could be an envoy, a offshoot, a worldly apparition that is, part of that goddess that was meant to like hold down Ganondorf, right? And that by joining up with Link, where Zelda's like, please lend him your power, that arm is like, an interpretation, a representation, a physical manifestation of the power of this goddess. And that in this scene, Link is like, making the pact. It's like, oh, I shall lend your power in order to like take down Ganondorf. And that's what I think.
So I also agree with you that it's not, I don't think that the person on the mural is Hylia either. I don't think that's Hylia. I think that this is a new game. I think it's going to be a new character. I think they're going to introduce new things on here. I think that the speculation that people have been running with has been very backward looking. Let's take all the existing lore and mix it together and see what we can come up with, and that's fun. But I really don't think that is the direction that Tears of the Kingdom is going to go. I think that it wants to do something new. It wants to do, and new things require new characters. So I also think that it's a new unrepresented goddess at this point, or entity that we haven't seen yet.
Absolutely.
The only reason why I think that maybe it could be Hylia, there's like one bit of evidence that maybe it could be Hylia, is that Demise says at the end of Skyward Sword that Zelda does not look like Hylia at all. Like that Hylia used to be beautiful, she had a strong and powerful, unique look, and that Zelda doesn't look anything like it. And so it's like, that makes sense. So if this thing was Hylia, it definitely looks very much different than what Zelda typically looks like. So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Right.
I still don't think so. I still don't think so. But that is a point of evidence in that direction.
Exactly, and a lot of people use the final shot within the previous trailer where like this goddess is like joining hands with who seems to be Zelda. It's like, oh, there's representation of like Hylia becoming Zelda and that they're intertwined and blah blah blah. I believe that at this point with the mural, considering that the mural represents what seems to be malice and the forces of moblins like going against like these humanoid entities. I feel like the point of Hylia becoming Zelda has long passed, in which that Zelda at this point is already represented as Hylia, and that their hands are connected by like, oh, this goddess is connected to Hylia, but since they can't use Hylia, they have to use who Hylia became, and that's Zelda. So that's what I'm going off of.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's along the lines of what I was thinking. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing a lot of older theories back when we knew a lot less, talking about how they think that the Sheikah technology was powered by the green magic that comes from the arm. Like that was a popular thought process. What do you think of that?
I honestly don't think it's powered like the green magic is like. I don't think the Sheikah is powered by the green magic.
The theory that I saw was like the green magic arm is siphoning Ganondorf's power away from him and using it to power Sheikah tech.
Oh yeah, so yeah, I forgot who made that one, but I've seen that one. Um, I don't think it's along those lines. I feel that there are three main power sources within The Legend of Zelda that they're going for Tears of the Kingdom, and it's like the power sources that are in relation to the three virtues: power, wisdom, and courage. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. But go
Yeah,
ahead, finish your thought.
yeah,
Yeah.
and this green magic is obviously an energy source being powered by courage, and what we've seen Sheikah Tech with that blue essence, the blue
Yeah.
flames, is powered by the power of wisdom, and then Malice in itself is just a mangled, messed up, twisted version of the power source of power.
Yeah,
Right?
colors
And
are often important in the Zelda series. So the fact that there's
oh
these
yeah.
three different source versions, I think is telling.
But that's what I'm going in, thinking about. That we're probably gonna get more on the idea of like power, wisdom, and courage, and how it plays a focal role within Tears of the Kingdom, because we didn't really get a lot of that in Breath of the Wild.
I found one of the most interesting parts of Breath of the Wild's original story was the fact that okay, so Calamity Ganon has been a thing forever, like way before they even found a way to deal with him. Like he would come back every once in a while, and the hero would fight him off. And it happened enough times that they noticed the pattern, and they're like, "Hey, this keeps happening." And so the Sheikah had built up enough technology that's like, all right, since we see that this keeps happening, we can try and predict when it's going to happen. We can prepare the hero. We can prepare the princess. We can build an army of robots and an army and four divine beasts to like blast away at him and keep the hero safe while we can automatize the process. We can control this force of nature that keeps coming after us with technology. We can control nature with technology. And deal with it. And the funny thing is that it works. It ends up working the first time. The 10,000 year story that they tell you in the beginning of the game. It works that time, and then the Sheikah lose their technology. They what is it? They get banished by the king. He doesn't like the fact that they have all this technology. He thinks that they're a threat to the kingdom. And then they find that Calamity Ganon's coming back, so they try and rapidly refine the resources, try to rapidly do it. It messes up. They can't do it. Ganondorf takes possession of all the divine beasts, takes control of all the guardians. I think that story is interesting, and there was always things missing. Why can he so easily take control of the things that were built to destroy him? There's always like little questions, and I really think that Tears of the Kingdom is going to like not only answer them well, but it's going to answer them perfectly, and make this whole thing. I just really have a big expectation for Tears of the Kingdom. Really want to see where they go with it.
Very big, and I don't blame you 100%, because like Breath of the Wild set the bar really, really high, right? So like hopefully we'll get something like really interesting in terms of the clarification, because as much lore we got in Breath of the Wild, quote unquote, there was still a lot of clarification needed in terms of what's going on with Tears of the Kingdom. And then like Tears of the Kingdom, it's time, and that's one of the aspects that a lot of people, I don't want to say didn't like, but thought was like a enough to be a slight against the game. And if Nintendo being Nintendo, they would like capitalize on fixing that, or making it better within Tears of the Kingdom. So like I said before in the stream, the air of mystery in Breath of the Wild, that's over. Right? Now I need answers in Tears of the Kingdom. Like it's answer time.
It's answer time, yeah.
So hopefully we'll get those.
Okay, I'm mindful of your time. We're hitting the 2-hour mark here, so I think that's everything. Unless there was something you wanted to comment on.
Oh no, I'm good. This was like a lot of fun, and I feel we got a lot of points out there.
Yeah, this was a great podcast. I want to thank you, MHK. You're the first Zelda content creator to come on my podcast. I don't have that much of a pedigree in this space yet, so I really appreciate you coming on and taking a chance.
Oh no, of course. It was a lot of fun, and thank you so much for reaching out.
Yep, no problem. This has been the Yggdrasil podcast. Thank you all very much for coming.